A public inquiry into the blood contamination scandal of the 1970s and 80s has begun with harrowing testimonies from some of those affected. Thousands of people received blood products from overseas donors who had hepatitis or HIV. Liz Hooper from Kyneton lost 2 husbands to hepatitis contracted through the blood. She told BBC Coventry and Warwickshire it's not just those who died who are the victims here.
By that time had a child, and there was a possibility that our son could have been contaminated with hepatitis C.
It's Phil Upton with you, headed home for a Monday tea time. Hope your day was okay today, manageable. You finished work. I would always say, always good to go, Monday, done, in the car and headed home. And particularly with respects to the first day of a public inquiry that started today into, as I was saying, what's been called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. More than 2,400 people died back in the 1970s and 80s after they received blood transfusions that were contaminated with hepatitis C and HIV. Emma Jones is a solicitor. She represents 240 people, and she hopes that this inquiry will get to the bottom of what happened.
We're hoping that the politicians will attend the inquiry and that the inquiry team won't settle for I can't remember, it was too long ago, and that the inquiry will delve deeper and ask probing questions to reach the truth, however unpalatable that might be.
Yeah, that's Emma Jones from the solicitors group representing 240 of the victims. One of those who's been at today's inquiry is Andy Evans from just across the Warwickshire border in Evesham. He contracted hepatitis C and HIV when he was just 5 years of age. He's now the chair of the Tainted Blood campaign group. Andy, afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Phil.
Obviously, the first day of the inquiry, I'll come to what's been discussed and what's happened today in a moment, if I can. But obviously, there must have been a long time. You never thought you'd even get to see this day, mustn't it?
Oh, to be honest, it's a surreal day for me. As much as we fought for and campaigned for this day, it's been such a long time coming. And if I look inside my heart, I think, did I ever really believe it would come? But yeah, here it is. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
How long are we expecting the inquiry to last then, Andy?
So the inquiry team seem to think it will last for about 2.5 to 3 years.
Wow.
I think because it's such a huge, complex subject. I mean, it's the time span they're looking at is right from the inception of the NHS up to the present day because of the way that we've been treated by successive governments and by the support schemes that have been in place. So it's a huge amount of time. We're talking about thousands of people who are involved, all of whose medical records have to be examined. Thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents must be, subpoenaed by to the Department of Health to give those up as well. It's an absolutely mammoth task for quite a small number of people. So really, I mean, I would be very surprised if it finishes within 2.5 years. I think we're probably looking at more like 5 years, something like that.
I think for many people hearing this inquiry started today and having heard maybe here and there about this story, we've had 1 or 2 victims like yourself on the programme before. The idea that some of this blood was obtained overseas, people were paid from overseas. Some of those were prisoners, some of those were drug addicts, and none of that was revealed at the time.
No, I mean, really, I think that the crux of this issue is that if we had decided in this country to become self-sufficient in harvesting our own blood products and fractionating them for the haemophilia clotting factor, then we would have seen far fewer people infected and far fewer people died now. And it's not as if we didn't know what was happening, where this blood was being sourced from. As you say, it was from the edges of society, it was prostitutes, it was drug addicts, it was people who needed the money and who were prepared to lie on their donation forms in order to get paid to give it.
You contracted this yourself when you were 5. What happened to you, Andy?
Yeah, I was 5 years old. My parents were told when I was 9. The doctors had known for a while previously to that, and that's a story that's echoed across the country, really, that people really weren't told in adequate amounts of time, especially if they were older and in relationships, to protect their loved ones. So my parents were told when I was 9. They kept it from me until I started to get ill. I was age 13. They put me on a horrific drug called AZT, which really wrecked my immune system. I remember, throwing up, being sick on the coach on the way to school, which, as you can imagine, was something of...
Well,
it didn't earn me any friends, let's put it that way.
It would have been horrific for you as a boy, young boy.
Absolutely. And then by the time I was 16, I was diagnosed as having progressed to full-blown AIDS. And this was at a time before any real effective treatments were around. It would be another 4 years until they came out. And during that time, my parents were told several times, he's got 2 weeks left to live. It'll be the next infection that finishes him off. But somehow I managed to survive.
Props to you, Andy, for hanging on in there. I mean, frankly, it sounds the tenacity to keep going, and not only for your own health, but on behalf of many people like you who have suffered. As I say, you're chair of this campaign group now, Tainted Blood. What do you want to see happen now?
I would like, by the end of this inquiry, for the judge to rubber stamp what we already know, really. We know there was wrongdoing. We know there were warnings that were ignored. We know people have been tested without their consent. We know that there has been some form of cover-up. We don't know the extent to which this has happened, but we do know that it's happened. So what we would like is for all of our evidence to be put before the judge, for him to examine it and say, actually, yes, you've indicated in all this campaign that you've been doing for 30 years, because, there's nothing less heartening than being ignored and having to bang on. And the whole issue around about, HIV, hepatitis C, is there's a huge amount of stigma attached, and so people aren't willing to come forward. And so it's been up to us and the few people that have put themselves out there to shout as loudly as possible about this. And I'm hoping really that having this inquiry and having the report and making it official will allow people to own what's happened to them and to be able to come out from the shadows and say, yes, this happened to me.
Andy, I wish you the very, very best of luck with it, and I look forward to the day when you are triumphant on the steps here in front of that inquiry with the result and the verdict that you want. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Phil. Cheers.
Andy Evans from the Tainted Blood campaign, and received contaminated blood at the age of just 5 years old.